resume recording. Yeah, that's okay. Great. And so here's just a little bit of what we'll be going through in this session. Fiona's going to kick off with an introduction to the project, a little bit about the background on the larger program that repliCATS is part of, what we've been up to in phase 1 and what we're doing in phase 2. Fallon's going to give you a live platform demo, which hopefully will help you out with sort of getting settled on the platform if you've never done this before. And then I'll talk you through some of the logistics of how the workshop week's going to work. And then we have some time for questions from you if you have any. So I will hand over to Fiona. Put myself on mute.
Hi everyone, thanks for joining us this morning, and thanks for signing up to do this repliCATS workshop. This slide is here just to spell out the acronym in case you haven't seen that spelled out before. Collaborative Assessment for Trustworthy Science, and that's what we're doing in the repliCATS project, is coming together in small groups to basically participate in a new model of peer review assessment of published papers. We're a big interdisciplinary team spread across 4 different faculties at the University of Melbourne, plus we have collaborators in the Netherlands and the UK and the US. So it's lots of people working on this project. And the repliCATS project itself, as you'll see on the next slide, it fits within the DARPA SCORE program. So there's 2 acronyms really quickly together there. So SCORE stands for Systemized Confidence in Open Research and Evidence, and DARPA is the US Department of Defense, the funding agency of the US Department of Defense. So one of the interesting things about this program is that it is funded by end users of research. So people who rely on the social science evidence base to make, in the case of DARPA, often life and death decisions, and they want to be sure that the evidence base they're using is sound and reliable. Most other replication work or meta-science work has historically been funded by philanthropic organisations, so SCORE marks a real turning point. There are 3 what they call technical aspects to the program. The first technical aspect is being run by the Centre for Open Science. So they're responsible for coordinating the database of published research that we're using in this project. They're also responsible for coordinating replication and reanalysis studies that then become the ground truth of what we're doing in the second technical aspect of the project. And what we're doing here in this is where repliCATS sits in aspect number 2. We're eliciting your predictions, human expert predictions about what's likely to replicate, how robust the findings are, how valid they are, and so on. Across the 2 phases of the program, we will have evaluated a total of 4,000 published research articles. And in this aspect, there have been 2 teams. There's us, repliCATS, and in phase 1, there was a second team, Replication Markets, who ran a prediction market. Then there's the third aspect, and this is really kind of the blue sky part of the program, the kind of research that DARPA is famous for. Extremely ambitious. There are 3 machine learning teams in this aspect, and they're creating algorithms that control the published software and assign confidence scores to them to help guide end users' judgments about how much confidence they should place in a particular piece of evidence. So really our project is the one that is creating the seed set for that machine learning aspect of the program. We're not, I mentioned there was another team running a prediction market, and we're not doing that. We're using, we do rely on the wisdom of crowds to some extent. Obviously, this is a big collaborative project, but we're using a structured elicitation protocol called the IDEA protocol. And it's a modified Delphi protocol, if that means anything to you, with one particular difference, which is that we do not rely on group consensus or behavioural consensus, as it's sometimes called. So in the first round, you'll be investigating. You'll be reading a particular research article and forming your own opinions about that, about aspects of the paper. You'll make some private judgments about its replicability, its credibility, and so on. After that, your judgments will be revealed to the rest of your group, and you'll get to see their judgments, and you'll have a discussion. And part of this will be on the platform in comments and chat, and part of it will be over Zoom in group discussions. Then after the discussion, you'll have an opportunity to update your own judgments, make a second private revised estimate. So if something about the group discussion has changed your mind, you can tell us that. It may not, sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't. Then at the end of all of that, we mathematically aggregate your individual judgments into a single assessment for your group. And we have a suite of aggregation methods for doing that, which we'll tell you about later. In phase 1 of the project, we evaluated the replicability of 3,000 published articles. They were selected from 62 journals across these 8 disciplines: business, marketing, business and marketing, criminology, economics, education, political science, psychology, public administration, and sociology. We also assessed 100 COVID preprints at the start of the pandemic. And we did this, or rather, you did this, people like you, our participants who have volunteered, who have been part of this project. We have a participant pool. I think it's even bigger than this, 550 quoted here now. I think it's up around 650 from over 40 countries who are experts across these domains. We've run a combination of face-to-face workshops back when that was a thing that you could do. We've run remote workshops like this one, and we've also done other things like partner with journal clubs like the Reproducibility Journal Club, who gave up some of their sessions to do assessments for us. So for every single one of these 3,000 articles, there have been evaluations of them by at least 4 of our participants, sometimes 5 or 6. So you can see already that this is, you know, at least double, perhaps triple what you would get, the return that you would get from a regular peer review process. So together, throughout phase 1, our expert pool provided us 14,000 individual assessments, or quantitative assessments, and 43,000 justifications for those assessments. So what we have from phase 1 is an enormous data set that we're still wading through. And because of our success in phase 1, we have become even more ambitious at this point. And so this time the phrase that we're using for phase 2 is we talk a lot about bushel papers. What that means is that we're looking now at a whole suite of credibility judgments. In phase 1, we were very focused on replicability. How likely is it that the study will replicate as one signal of credibility? In phase 2, we're opening that up to look at a lot of other factors too, which I'll show you on the next slide, but not yet. The other thing that's different about phase 2 compared to phase 1 is that in phase 1 we were quite focused on a single claim within a paper. So if you look at this kind of network model on the side here, you can think of this as a rough map of an argument in a paper. So there's a central claim of the paper, often the title of the paper. There are some slightly more specific claims, perhaps in the abstract or in the conclusion. By the time you get down to this 3rd level, what you're looking at are quite specific hypotheses within the paper, or specific research questions, sorry. And down the bottom in blue, what we've called these level 4 claims, you're looking at individual bits of evidence, individual results, individual statistical tests, and how they may or may not support the higher level claims. So in phase 2, we're looking at this whole network of claims within a paper, or at least selected claims from each of these levels. So we want you to first consider the paper holistically, and we'll ask a bunch of questions throughout the workshop that ask you to evaluate the paper overall, or to evaluate the central argument or the central claim of the paper. And then we have a series of questions targeting those specific level 4 individual results. And on the next slide, there's more information here about, so this is the suite of credibility signals that we're looking at now. I said that we were moving beyond just examining replicability. So here are some of the other things we're looking at this time. We'll be looking at comprehensibility, how well you understand the paper, prior plausibility of the underlying effect, transparency, so how clearly reported the methods, materials and analysis are, replicability, again, robustness, validity, generalizability, and we'll also be asking for your overall credibility rating. Here are the exact questions that we'll be asking for each of those credibility dimensions. In case you're interested in the exact wording, there's also a separate video on this that will be available soon that talks through each of these questions in detail, if you're interested in finding out more. And one thing to note is that each of these questions will have a tooltip associated with them that Fallon will show you on the platform that will give you more of an idea of what we mean by what we're trying to get at in each question. For now, I'll just say that credibility, the final question that we ask, is one where we ask you simply, how would you score the credibility of this paper overall? For that question, we want you to think about the answers you've given to the other 7 questions. So think about, reconsider all of those dimensions that you've already evaluated, and also feel free to throw in anything else that seems important to you. If you think we've missed something in those 7 dimensions, then that can be part of your credibility score too. So credibility is not a separate dimension to all of these other 7 things. Rather, it's a sort of subjective, squishy amalgamation of them all, plus whatever else you think is important. The credibility question also has a text box associated with it, and that's where you can dump any of your thoughts about any of these other questions as well. So you won't find text boxes with most of the other questions. You will find one with comprehensibility, but you won't find them with the other questions. Save up all of your thoughts about on your justifications, your reasons for those other scores, and put them all in the box at the end under credibility. Okay, so after you've done those 8 questions evaluating the paper overall, then you'll move to a set of evidence level questions, or these level 4 individual results. And these will only be accessible to you after you've completed the other 8 questions. How many there are in each paper is a bit variable. Sometimes you'll get lucky and there'll only be 2 or 3. Occasionally there'll be up to 10, but not very often. It just depends on the paper. Oh, great. Garbage collection in my street. Sorry, it's going to be noisy. I'll talk louder. So these level 4 claims, as we've said, unique or individual results. So they might be the outcome of a particular statistical test, for example. What we're interested about in this question 9 is whether your overall credibility rating, the one you gave for the whole paper, whether that would be different if you were evaluating just this particular result. So you might be able to, you can no doubt easily imagine a paper that is otherwise quite good, that you might give a high credibility score to, except for 1 or 2 results that just don't look quite right. You might want to give those a low credibility rating. They don't affect very much how you feel about the overall credibility, because you think these ones are a bit tangential anyway. They're not very relevant to the main claim in the paper. And so you can tell us that in question 9B, relevance, there's a typo there. So in question 9A, you tell us whether your credibility judgment for this particular bit of information, this particular result, would deviate from your overall judgment. And in question 9B, you tell us whether you think this particular result is relevant to the main claim. This question, we're going to ask you to answer, this 9B question, we're going to ask you to answer on a scale from 0 to 100. And that's going to feel a bit weird, maybe. How to approach the way, can we just go back to that relevance question? The way that I would approach that is actually to start by thinking of the relevance question as a yes. Imagine that you've been asked that relevance question as a yes or no question. So is this particular result relevant to the main conclusion? If it had been a binary question and you would have answered no to that binary question, then give relevance a rating below 50. If you would have answered yes, then give it a rating above 50. If you think it's the absolute central claim of the paper, then give it a very high rating. If you think it's completely irrelevant, which I hope doesn't happen very often, it's unlikely but possible, then give it a very, very low rating. Okay, and then there's one final question in question 9, but this will only appear once for one of the claims, and it's basically a repeat of the replicability question. Okay, next slide. All right, so our response formats, right, so this is, I see my answer is trying to skip me ahead now. So for most questions, we're asking you to answer with a point estimate, a score between 0 and 100. So that's for just all of the validity questions, generalizability, robustness, pretty much everything you'll be answering 0 to 100. For a smaller set of questions, the ones about credibility, robustness, and replicability, we'll be asking you to give your response as an interval. So we're still talking about a range from 0 to 100. And for some of these questions, it will be a probability that you're answering with. For replicability and robustness, you'll be giving us a probability answer. But we want to get some sense of your certainty or uncertainty about those responses. For the credibility question, so for robustness and replicability, the question will be something like, what's the probability that cross replications would find a statistically significant effect in the same direction as the original? Or for robustness, it'll be, what's the probability that independent analyses would find a consistent effect? So they're probability questions there. It probably doesn't feel that weird to give an interval. For credibility, it's just a score, 0 to 100. So in that case, it might feel a bit strange at first to be answering with an interval. The way I think about the credibility question is as though I'm marking a student's essay. When you're marking a student's essay, you often have a sense of what the score should be, but perhaps, you know, the precise number doesn't immediately jump out. You know that the score should sit somewhere in this range. So for the credibility judgment, imagine yourself marking a student essay. The lower bound here is the lowest score that you would feel comfortable giving the essay. The higher bound is the highest score that you would feel comfortable giving the essay, and the best estimate is where you would ultimately land. It's not an essay, it's published paper, but the same kind of principle applies. Okay, all right, so now hopefully all of that abstract stuff that I've just said will make sense when Fallon gives you this demonstration of the platform, so you can see what it's going to look like for real.
Great. I'm just going to stop sharing and hand over to you, Fallon.
Yeah, no worries. Give me just a second while I start sharing.
No worries.
Thank you. All right. And like Fiona, I'm just going to apologize in advance if there's a little bit of construction noise behind me, but hopefully it doesn't detract too much. Okay, so you guys can see the platform fine? Great, all right. So for most of you, when you signed up and created your accounts, you would have been ported into the platform and will have seen nothing. From today, once you log in, what you will get ported into is this home page, and you'll see your group and the papers that are assigned to your group. On the top right of the screen, you will see the avatar that you have been assigned. So all your judgments in the platform will be made and displayed using this avatar. So it effectively means that during discussion, while you might see each other, you can use avatars to refer to particular responses, and it maintains the anonymity of the person making the judgments within the group. As Fiona mentioned, we use a structured group elicitation approach. So the way that the platform has been operationalized also builds in this concept of a round one and then opportunity for discussion before you go into round two. So what I'm going to show you first is what round one in a bushel paper looks like. All right, so when evaluating these papers, we will first ask you to make a series of judgments at the paper level before you're able to proceed and evaluate a subset of the results presented in the paper. So what you see on the left-hand panel is the information that's available to you for that first set of paper level questions, which is quite minimal. So you have the title, the abstract, and a link to the full text for the paper. On the right-hand panel are the first set of paper level questions. And this is where you will enter your estimates as well as your reasoning. This stationary navigation panel here shows you the number of questions, and the panel is interactive. So you can click on it and go to a specific question. We do, however, recommend that you work through the questions in the order presented from 1 to 8. And so for each question where you see reasoning, you'll see grayed out placeholder text as well, giving you some prompts about guidance for the reasoning you provide. But for all the questions, as Fiona mentioned, there's a tooltip here. So if you hover over it, it will give you quick further clarification. At any time, if you want additional guidance or resources when you're approaching answering each of these credibility dimensions, you can click here, the resources button, and it will take you to our webpage, and there's far more comprehensive guidance that we've broken down for you for how to answer and approach each of these questions. So there is a lot of decision support material available to you very quickly via the platform. One other feature of sort of each of the questions is you'll see a little save button. If you think that you're going to work through this fairly slowly, you can save as you go. All that means is that if something happens or your browser crashes, it will save the responses that you have made in this particular paper, but you don't have to save as you go if you don't want to. So for questions 2 through to 7, you'll see that there are no text boxes for you to make comments. It's just the question, the response formats that Fiona talked about, and the tooltips. And that is because we want you to put all your reasoning here in question 8. So you can use the navigation panel. So if you're working on something and you think, oh, I would actually like to say something about my robustness judgment, you can easily navigate to the credibility question, pop it in, and return to where you were working. So that's effectively the first set of paper level questions. For the purpose of the demonstration, I'm just going to enter a sample judgment here. And you'll see the moment you do enter a credibility judgment, it triggers a little button that allows you to continue with the evidence level questions. This activates a new panel which shows you how many results there are available for this particular paper to be evaluated. So for this paper, it's 4. And for this section of the elicitation, the particular result that you're evaluating appears on the top panel. And you can also click here to show more context, and it will show you just the statistical results reported in the paper, as well as a page reference, as well as the underlying hypothesis or research question that this result is supporting. All right, so for question, and you can sort of move through the results as you go. So for question 9A, as Fiona mentioned, we're asking for your evaluation of this particular result, and if you would rate its credibility differently. So what you will see is that for each of these results, it's pre-populated with your credibility response. So this is the judgment that you saw me enter in my overall credibility earlier in question 8. Until you have completed all of these result level judgments, you will not be able to submit and go to round 2. So you will see that this will remain grayed out until you have entered all of your judgments. As you work through these evidence level responses, if at any time you find yourself thinking it would be nice to see them, all displayed, you'll see here on the left-hand panel, once you enter this results level set, you will actually see all of the results displayed on the left. But at any time, you know that the particular result you're evaluating will be at the top of the left-hand panel there. So this is the round 1 interface very, very quickly. When you submit, it will take you back to the home screen. Because I haven't done so, I'm just going to cheat and do that. And it's going to tell me that I'm going to lose my results if I haven't saved them. Once you're back on the home screen, and as you guys work through the papers during the week, you will very easily see when they're ready for round 2, because it will tell you that this particular paper is now ready for your round 2 judgment. So I'm just really quickly going to show you a couple of things that are different about the round 2 interface. All right, so in round 2, the biggest difference is that there are now 3 adjustable panels. So still the claim information on the far left. This middle panel will now show you your judgment as well as your group's judgment and an aggregated result for each question. And the far right panel will, where there is discussion, will show you some additional information. As you can see here, this is just a demo claim. So in preparation for your group discussion, you will be able to go in and review your round 2, and you will be able to see all the different judgments for these questions. So once again, just for the purposes of demonstration, I'm going to show you just a couple of things that are different between the round 1 and round 2 interface. All right. So when you start reviewing the evidence level questions to revise or update them for round 2, the one big difference is that your round 2 judgment is now pre-populated with the response that you made in round 1. And for easy reference, you've got the credibility judgment that you've entered for round 2 if it changed, just so you can very easily navigate that. The rest of this round 2 interface will work exactly the same way as in round 1. So there's just a couple of other things that I'll point out to you. Apart from the resources that you can access at any time, we also have a quick glossary or terms of reference, so you can very quickly access that as well. If you run into any trouble, or if you want to report a breach in the code of conduct, you can use the contact us. It will trigger a web form, and you can submit that through, and it comes to the repliCATS team, and we will try and troubleshoot for you or respond to your problems straight away. And the last thing I'm going to say is that the platform was or has been optimized for Google Chrome. So we do strongly recommend that you use Google Chrome when you're working through the papers, because we can't guarantee that another browser won't do some things that aren't anticipated. So you Yeah, we just strongly recommend that you use Chrome if you can. And that's about it. There's a video as well on the resources page with this demo as me pretending to be someone called Helen, because everyone gets my name wrong. But I'll stop there and hand over to Arms.
Thank you. Thanks very much, Helen. Okay, I will share my screen. Okay, let's come back up. So yeah, to finish off the session, I'm just going to talk you through some of the detailed logistics of the rest of the week, essentially. So as mentioned, the assessments are obviously completed remotely. Every one of you has been assigned to a group of 4 to 5, actually, people, and we've tried to do that according to time zones. So you're in sort of a same or a similar time zone with people in your group. Each group also has a dedicated facilitator assigned to them, which this workshop is someone from the repliCATS team. So you've got an expert repliCATS person handy. And you will all be assessing 2 to 3 papers over the course of the workshop. We've done our best to make sure that the workload for the groups are pretty similar. So if you have 3 papers, they might be a little bit shorter or have fewer of those level 4 questions. If you have 2, there might be a few more questions to answer, or the papers might be a bit longer. We try to sort of balance it out a little bit to make it fair. And your group will, as mentioned, meet virtually as well towards the end of the week to discuss the papers you've been working on. So just in terms of giving you a bit of a suggested timeline, so this is not set in stone, it'll be a little bit up to your group and how you're tracking through the week. So today, July 20th, for us at least, for some of you, not yet. If you haven't already, go and check in on Slack. You'll be assigned to a particular group. Each group has their own channel, so you can go say hello to your group members and say hello to your facilitators so that they know you exist and you're present and you're happy to be working on this. And yeah, log on to the platform and you can immediately start assessing claims as soon as we're done here today. You're happy to, welcome to get cracking. And then in the coming days, you can work on those papers in your own time. So for your round 1, that's you working on it privately. It's a good idea to keep an eye on Slack or an email for some notifications, especially around scheduling a date and a time for your group discussions. So we do recommend that you sort of set that time kind of early on so that you have a deadline to work towards to make sure you get those round 1 judgments in. And so towards the end of the workshop, just to give you plenty of time to get those round 1 judgments in is when the discussion will be held. If you want to do it earlier, if your group is, really quick and everybody's ready to go, you can do it earlier, but generally people need a little bit of time. So you'll meet up to have a facilitator-led discussion around the papers, and you can start updating your judgments and completing your round 2 by the end of the workshop. So yeah, it should be clear by now that there's a few steps involved here. And then so just to give you a sense of the time commitment over the course of the week of the workshop. So because we're asking questions about the paper in general, sort of more holistically, it's obviously a good idea to perhaps not read the entire paper depending on the length of it, but at least skim the paper so you get a sense of the whole paper and not just a single claim, obviously. Could take about 30 minutes, but depends on how fast you read or how quickly you can skim. And then answering the paper level questions, so that's those first 8 questions, be around 15 minutes to do that. The same, depending on how many evidence level questions there are for you to address, another 15 minutes or so. And then the discussion per paper, we sort of recommend to take about half an hour per paper to discuss. Again, if your group is in agreement on most of the questions, then maybe this will be a bit quicker. If there's lots of discussion in terms of, people give really divergent estimates, you might have a lot to talk about. But we try to, recommend that you sort of keep it to around 30 minutes per paper just to make it manageable, especially if you have 3 papers to go through. And then kind of updating your estimates in round 2 should be a little bit quicker. As Fallon demonstrated, a lot of it is pre-populated with your round 1 answers, and you don't have to change. Only change your estimates, obviously, if something in your comprehension or your assessment of the credibility or any of the other sort of, any of the dimensions has changed, then, change your answer, but you don't have to. So that all adds up to about 4 to 5 hours over the course of the week. We're not counting here like any time you might spend on Slack or in social media talking about how great your experience is, but so we definitely do recommend, you know, engage with it on the various sort of communication channels we've set up for you as well. Right. So a little bit about working in groups. You've all been assigned to a particular group, which is, you know, has a mythical creature dedicated to it. So you'll be known as Nessie or Drop Bear as your group. We hope that you have a good experience working with the various people in your group. And yeah, I mean, it's important to us that the repliCATS community is inclusive and friendly. And so if you have any issues with sort of the group or with the group work, and as Fallon was saying, we expect people to uphold the code of conduct. So if there's any issues and you feel uncomfortable, please do let us know, because we're here sort of to make sure that everybody has a good experience working in their group. So on that, you know, some recommendations is, you know, please go and introduce yourself on Slack to your group members, which I've already said. You know, be respectful. People come from different disciplines, have different backgrounds. Remember your code of conduct, just, you know, play nice essentially. And remember to respond promptly to any doodle polls or meeting requests. So your facilitator will do their best to try and find a date and a time for everybody to meet. But this obviously works best if you respond promptly, so that, you know, that becomes easier to set up. And yeah, we want everybody to have fun doing this as well. What we want you to avoid is to discuss the judgments that you've made privately with your group members before the discussion happens, right? So those round one judgments are supposed to be private judgments. You can discuss this with, you know, a colleague, or you can look up some things online to help you make those judgments about that particular paper, but don't discuss it with your group members just yet, because they have to be able to make their own sort of private judgments as well. And we also tell people to please don't identify yourself on the platform. So when you're putting in your comments in that text box in question 8, don't use your name or your affiliation, and just, if you're referring to other people, I say like, oh, Koala 311 also said X, Y, or Z, but don't say, you know, John or Julie, that sort of thing. So, because we want, you know, we want to keep the anonymity of people who are responding to these questions on the platform.
Can I ask you about that?
Sure.
So during the discussion, are you able to say that that was your claim or that was what you wrote, to be able to discuss it?
Good, excellent question. You can if you want to, but it's kind of set up to, we don't necessarily need people to do that. In fact, we want people to think about the judgments as a whole. So we'll talk about, you know, like some really low estimates and some really high estimates, and we'll ask people to comment on, oh, what would be a reason for someone to give such a low estimate, but not to say like, well, what did you, you know, what estimate did you give? It's really about sort of exploring the variety of judgments and what the underlying reasons might be, rather than sort of, yeah. What happens naturally is sometimes people just identify and say, oh, I gave it a really low estimate, but that's not really what we're after, but we can't stop people from doing that. But again, yeah, it's a little bit up to people, but I hope that answers your question. And also your facilitator will be on hand to sort of guide that process. So good question. Yeah, and
I mean,
go for it.
What we're trying to avoid is a situation where people say, you know, oh, look at that estimate, you know, with the really wide interval all the way down there, but who was that? And
yeah,
to say, oh, it was me, I did that. That's the kind of situation that we're trying to avoid. So in that situation, we would instead, just as Arns has stated, you know, say, oh, interesting, what would make someone so uncertain in this case? Or interesting, in a narrow interval, what are the kind of things that you would have to know to be so confident in your judgment? So that those questions would be asked in a general way, not who is this? That's
exactly. Yeah, we're not into sort of naming and shaming. It's really about exploring, you know, the variety of judgments and, you know, why people might think that way. yeah, and so in terms of how we communicate throughout the week, so please use the platform to obviously assess papers that are assigned to your group and submit your judgments and your reasoning for them. You can also comment once you go into round 2, you can go and comment on other people's judgments. So you have sight of what other people have said and you can make comments on that. As Fallon showed, you can quickly access resources. There's a glossary that explains the terms that we use. And yeah, we can sort of track progress throughout in the community page where there's a link on the platform as well. We've set up that Slack, those Slack channels for your groups where you can chat to your group members. It's also the place where you can troubleshoot and access frequently asked questions. Facilitator will be handy for you to sort of ask questions of, so they will be sort of your first point of contact. So rather than sending us an email, you can just ask your facilitator and they will pretty much know everything. And if they don't, they can ask the rest of us. And we will also, if there's any news or any updates, we will share that on Slack. If there's anyone who's not on Slack, don't worry, you won't miss out. We will make sure that we email you or use whatever communication channel you specify to us that you're comfortable with. And there'll be some fun things on Slack as well. So we try to keep it sort of engaging and fun. So keep an eye out for any sort of activities. And if you need to talk to us, there's that contact us button on the platform, which gets you into a web form where you can tell us, ask questions or give us any comments that you want to share with us, or you can email us at the repliCATS contact email address. We encourage you to share your experience on social media. If you're having fun, let us know and let the world know. You can also show off your badges. People who return will be familiar with the badges. Those are sort of badges you get when you hit certain milestones on the platform, when you assessed your first claim, for instance. Feel free to share them. People get very excited about those badges, which we really love. However, to protect the integrity of the SCORE program, we ask you to not publicly share paper information or judgments. As Fiona said, there's other people working, other groups working on this, and we need to make sure that our judgments and the papers that we're working on sort of remain confidential and are not widely shared. And yeah, so this is just about the code of conduct. There's a link that's been shared with you, and that can be accessed through the resources page as well. Just please do go and have a read. We do want to make sure that everybody has, a harassment-free and enjoyable experience, and that we remain a community that is inclusive and friendly. So we, our expectation is that everybody sort of upholds that code of conduct. And basically we're ready to get started. As Fallon said, please do use Chrome. If you don't have it, please download it. It's obviously free because it won't work as well if you're using something else. And also the platform is configured for laptops. And so if you're working on a tablet, that's also not going to work very well. So do recommend that you use a laptop with Chrome installed. The platform link was sent to you. If you can't find it, just email us, we'll send it to you. You've all set up accounts. When we loaded the new groups onto the platform, that does mean that the platform was reset. So if anyone's had any issues logging on, which at least one person's emailed me about, your password has been reset to password. So the next time you do log on, we'll need you to reset your password, unfortunately, but it should work. Again, if you have any issues, just email us on the repliCATS contact email address and we'll try to sort something out for you. Yeah, and there's lots of resources available for you to look at to help you work through those questions. There's some detailed participant guidelines. There's also a little cheat sheet, which is linked on the resources page. But I think what will be most helpful is, that platform demo that Fallon has provided. And there'll be a video on how to answer the questions. And then on that resources webpage, those clickable descriptions of how to answer the credibility or robustness question will be really helpful. And also please do use the tooltips on the platform for that quick little intro into what each of the questions is asking you to address. That's pretty much it. If you still need some help, use that contact us button on the platform or email us. And if you have any issues in terms of breaches of the code of conduct, let Fallon know, or use that web form as well if you're more comfortable with that. Yes, and so I will open it up to some questions from you if you have any. You can pop a question in the chat if you like, or just raise your hand and just ask. I might stop sharing. Any questions at all? Will the slides be shared? Yes, we can share. Well, we will share this as a presentation, but I think we can also share. Can we share the slides? Yeah, I think so. No worries. Have we put everybody else to sleep?
I was just going to say
Oh, we've been so clear that no one has a question.
yeah, there's a version of these slides already up on the resources page from
of course,
the workshop.
Yeah, we add to the resources as we go through these various workshops. And I know that some of you, quite a few of you actually have been to previous workshops. This will all be, you know, clear to you already.
Okay.
If there's no questions, I think, yeah, we'll let you go. And, you know, if it's not ridiculously late, you can go into the platform and yeah, and get started. Yeah, and you know where to find us. If there's anything, just let us know. We're here to help, and your facilitators will be on hand to help you out today as well, just to get you started.
Thanks again for joining this workshop. We really
yes. Thank you so much. We hope you have a great time doing it.
That was super helpful. Thank you.
Good luck, everyone.
Thank you. Thanks for joining.